Today, Coming Home, winner of the Gabriel Award in 2003.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Van Evra in Vancouver.
And I'm Erik Denison in Edmonton.
Welcome to Out Front.
The idea of home means to me the place that really forms you and where you experience your life. It is the place that witnesses your life.
For me, the idea of home has always been a really elusive thing. I've moved from place to place and from city to city and have moved every 6 or 8 months and never had a place that I felt like I could call home.
A home is really your life and represents your life because it's almost as if the echoes of your life fill it.
Lots of apartments and houses and great places, but never that kind of place that gives you the solace and comfort of a place that you can come back to at the end of the day and all of your worries can kind of drift away. It's your kind of hideout from the rest of the world.
My parents moved into the house right before I was born, and one of the things I remember most about the house is the constant socializing going on, and my mom was always the hub of that, and that she'd be in the kitchen cooking, and my aunts would be in there talking, and her laughter filled the house, and that made the house very jolly. And it was almost when she left to go shopping and you'd be here that the house lost some of its warmth because it was now quieter. My mom was known to be very loud and boisterous. Even when you're in another room, you always heard my mom. And my dad, he always lived down in the basement separate. He was always in the basement tinkering with stuff.
I'd been living in an apartment on Granville Street, and it was noisy, and every time a bus went by, the apartment would shake. And I decided that I wanted to find a home. So I came to this house, and it was the funniest feeling. I was standing on the sidewalk in front of the house, hadn't been inside, and it hit me that I would live in this house until I leave the city. I had no idea why I felt that way. And then when I came inside, it was just nothing but warmth. There was just something that seemed to be almost built into the walls. And I immediately said, I'll take it.
I always felt like this house had a personality to it. Just the creaks and the noises that a house makes is almost as if it's talking at the end of the day after a long day of relatives coming over and people having fun and cooking, and at the end of the day, like it's so tired and it's stretching or snoring maybe that's what the creaks and groans are in an old house.
And after I'd moved in, it was exactly what I expected. And friends would come over and they would always comment on what a warm, cozy place it was, and they all wanted to spend time here. And I always wondered who had lived here before and what it was that had given this house that feeling.
With my dad downstairs and my mom upstairs, one of the things that really became evident is that their marriage was drifting apart. They would be in different places in the house. It became obvious to us as kids that the different places they are in the house meant that they were in different places in their marriage. And so when I was 14 or 15, they decided to separate. I always felt like my real home was that house. So leaving the house was this sense of really leaving myself behind. And so I really lost myself.
I'd been up all night meeting a deadline and had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock in the morning or so and had one of those crazy sleeps when I slept until about 2 in the afternoon, and it was really fitful and full of all kinds of really very sharp, vivid dreams. And I woke up and I was just trying to get myself to come back to the world, and I was thinking about these dreams that I'd had, and there was a knock at the door. So I went to the door and there's this woman standing there, and she was in her 50s. She had a bobbed gray hair, and she asked me how long I've lived in this house. And I said, for about 2 years. And she asked me if I owned it, and I said, no, I rent. And figuring she was a real estate agent, I told her that I could give her my landlord's phone number. And she said, no, let me explain why I'm here. She said, my sister just died yesterday in a hospice in North Vancouver, and she died of liver cancer. And she went on to explain that this house had been her sister's only real home, that this is where she moved when she got married, this is where she raised her children, and that this place was her solace. And she talked about how her sister would spend hours in the kitchen cooking, and how there was always music playing and people would always be coming by, and that it was a really sort of high activity household. And then she was asking me about me, and I said, it's funny because I spend hours and hours cooking, and I sit in that same sunny front window and read and listen to music. And we ended up standing on the front porch for a good couple of hours talking about her sister and about her sister's illness and about her love for this house. And suddenly it was all explained to me. It all made sense why this house had the feeling that it did.
So I went off to school in Toronto at Ryerson, and in my third year of university, it was just before Christmas, and my mom, in talking to her on the phone, I got a sense that she was sick, but I didn't know the extent of it until I got home. And I arrived on my birthday back home, and that's when my mom told me she was going to die. To be only 20 and to be losing your mom is such a robbery. It's such a sense of anger, and because she was all alone, because my dad and her had split up, someone had to take care of her, and I became that person. And I remember one of the things, as she was dying, we had to come to where the house is in Kitsilano in Vancouver. She found it still too painful, even on her deathbed, to go by the house that was so much of who she was. So she died without ever seeing the house again. And the interesting thing that the doctor said is they say that the cancer had been in her body for about 6 years, and they pinpointed the beginning of the cancer to almost exactly the point where my parents separated and my mom lost the house.
So when this woman asked me if I would come to the funeral, I was a little taken aback. And she talked about it a little bit more and said that she really felt like it would be important to have somebody who represents the house, because the house was such an integral part of her sister's life, and that it would mean a lot to her if I went. So finally I said, okay, I'll come. And I came back inside and I sat down, and I realized that one of the dreams that I'd had that afternoon that I had found so disconcerting was that I had been lying in a hospice in North Vancouver, dying of liver cancer. And it was like a lightning bolt went down my spine.
Then I remember the day of the funeral. I remember standing in front of the crowd giving a eulogy and looking at the crowd, but not really seeing anyone's face, and not even really being able to deliver the eulogy that well, because it's just so surreal to be at your mom's funeral at 20 years old. But you're trying to capture this person, but you want to add humor to it. You want to capture the person who they are. And I just remember delivering this eulogy, and I can't remember what I even said, and feeling like I was delivering a speech and then sitting down again.
When I arrived at the funeral, I felt silly for even being there, and I didn't see the woman who had been on my doorstep. She was nowhere to be seen, and part of me wanted to just turn around and run right back out the door, but I thought, no, I'm going to stay for this. So eventually, the service started up, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was full of music. But the most potent part of the whole experience was when her son, who couldn't have been more than 20 or 21 or so, stood up and delivered a eulogy. It was just such a tender, beautiful tribute to his mother, and it was full of humor and full of love and full of sadness. And after the service, I came home and I just cried, and I cried for the son who had lost his mother, and for the woman who had lost her home to divorce, and for my own good fortune at having the opportunity to live in such a place.
After I said goodbye to my mom, and after I said goodbye to really a huge part of my past and the house even, I went back to Toronto and ended up getting a job at CBC National Radio News. And then I decided after graduating that I didn't want to stay in the national newsroom. I wanted to go to Vancouver to work. It was less about the job and less about the employment, as sort of wanting to go back to my childhood city one last time, knowing that I'd probably end up anywhere in the world and just wanting to spend one more year back in my childhood city, I would always make a point of driving by the house, trying to peek in the windows as you're driving by quickly, because you don't want to seem like a stalker or a weirdo, but yet it's your house, right? And you're interested in seeing what's happened to it, or peeking over the fence at night so that no one sees you peeking over to see what the backyard where you spent so many hours playing, but it was so formative of who you are.
So I decided to have a party. So I invited a bunch of friends and I put a notice around at work, just a little poster saying that if anybody wanted to come by, they were more than welcome. And it was the morning of the party and I got a call from a reporter named Erik. Now, Erik is somebody who I had worked with for, I don't know, probably 6 months or a year or so, and we worked maybe 15 feet apart. But he was one of those people in this huge newsroom of people who really stood out for me. He always made me laugh, and he just had such a bright, witty sense of humor, and just one of those people that you meet that you realize you speak the same language. And so he called up and he said, so, you're having a party tonight? And I said, yeah, you're going to come by. And he said, yeah, is this the address? And he read the address back to me. And I said, yeah, that's the one, definitely come by. And then there was sort of a pause and he goes, Jen? And I said, yeah. And he goes, that's the house where I grew up. And then everything clicked. And I realized that he was the son who had delivered that eulogy that had knocked me out years before. And out of my mouth came, Erik, I was at your mother's funeral.
I've just found it so weird and wonderful, and I had this huge smile on my face that I knew someone who lived in my childhood home and that I'd at last be able to go inside. But I didn't know whether she saw the significance that she was in my childhood home that I'd spent so many formative years in. But she did, and so she said that I should come and see the house at the party, and so I did.
I was really nervous. I wasn't really sure how you prepare for someone who's coming over to your house, and your house also happens to be their childhood home. I mean, I felt like I should just hand him the keys and say, okay, here's your house back. But he ended up taking me on a tour of the house through his eyes and through his memories, and showed me the places where he'd fallen down and hit his head, and where he and his dad had built a deck together. And he showed me his bedroom, which is now my bedroom, and pointed out all the spots where the monsters and the boogeymen hide, so that was good to know. For me, to have this living, breathing person walking through with real memories and real stories just added to the warmth and the hominess of this place.
That was so great to get an opportunity to walk through the house. I really felt in my conversation with Jen that I was reconnecting with my past, and in many ways I almost felt like this house was again my house. And maybe it's also because she's gonna stay here, and so I know that I can always come back here, and it's once again kind of part of me.
I don't know how long I'll live in this house. I have thought about moving before, but anytime I've gone to leave, I just haven't been able to do it. And as Erik said, a home is a place that witnesses your life, and I think even shapes it to a large degree. So part of who I am is now in these walls. But especially after the experience that Erik and I shared, I truly know what it is to come home. In Vancouver, I'm Jennifer Van Evra.
And in Edmonton, I'm Erik Denison.
This is Out Front.